Hello, it's great to be here. My name's Dan Hughes from Alpha Property Insight, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion about occupier and how the needs are changing. In preparation for this session, I did a quick search for thoughts about how occupier demands were changing, and it's fair to say that there are quite a lot of results. So just to quote a couple of the first ones that came up, first headlines, Barclays Bank boss suggests big offices may be a thing of the past, Fujitsu announces permanent work from home plan, Twitter allows hybrid future of working from home in an office. So occupier needs are clearly changing fast. And whilst a lot of this has been accelerated and against the backdrop of COVID-19, there's little doubt that technology is a key element in driving and enabling this. So today I am delighted to welcome Thomas Hertling from Real Estate Projects Executive at Google. And we will hopefully soon be joined by Cesar Jerry, Head of Innovation and Workplace Technology at Verizon. Before I get into the questions, I would say please do ask questions. As soon as we can get questions coming through, I'll make sure they're fed in. And I would just like to welcome Cesar to the conversation. Thomas, perhaps I could start with you. If you could just say a few words about you and your role, and also how you think technology has changed occupier needs in recent years.
Okay, well, thanks for having me, and hello, everyone. Quick words to myself. At the moment, I am running a successful facility management and catering business at home for my wife and our newborn daughter. And in my other role, I'm a real estate project executive working for Google. My background is I'm a trained architect, certified project manager, and have plus 10 years experience in the real estate sector. My main responsibility with Google is to deliver capital projects across our portfolio. And before, I worked as a project and program manager for some blue chip clients, but was also involved in some infrastructure projects like Heathrow expansion. In my view, I think technology has changed and will change, like the occupier sector over the years, and we're still like in a, let's say, very traditional industry. But one in my previous role, I was part of a global portfolio team, and we developed like a more, let's say, automated reporting tool for a large insurance company where we collected data about their projects. Are they in time? Are they on budget? And instead of delivering like these spreadsheet reports, we provided our client an interactive reporting tool. They could like see, okay, is the majority of my projects on time? What is in the pipeline? And which helped him to make faster decisions and to be more efficient. And I would also say, like for Google itself, we're using a lot of technology, which is mostly like improving the user experience. So yeah, I would say technology is playing a big role.
Perfect. I'd like to come back in a minute to perhaps how you think that's going to change in the coming years, but maybe Cesar, I could start with you with the same question. If you could just say a few words about you, your role, and how you think technology's changed occupier needs in the past. I think you're on mute, Cesar. So whilst we just get unmuted, Thomas, maybe if I could come back to you, what do you think are the main changes that you're going to see? Obviously, you've worked with a number of different companies and type of occupier there, and technology, I'm sure, has changed for all of them and had an impact. What do you think are the big changes that you see happening in the next couple of years because of technology in this space? How's its use going to change?
I think we probably will see like a lot of change when it comes down to like the user experience within our properties. So as an example, you work for a big company and you travel from London to New York to the other office, and then you're facing like a, let's say 20,000 square meters office, and how do you navigate your way around? Where do you know where I can find a coffee? Where's the next restaurant? Where are my co-workers? Can I book a meeting room there? Can I book a desk? So I think like this interaction between a building and the users will be more relevant and more important in the future. But also how we operate our buildings, technology which helps us to monitor our energy consumption, let us control our HVAC system, and also like the safety bit around this technology to make sure that nobody like could, let's say, hack in our systems and manipulate them.
Yeah. Okay. So you raised some interesting points. I'm just going to see if Cesar is there with us on audio. Not yet. He can hear us, but we can't hear him. Okay. So Thomas, I'll stick with you because you raised some really interesting points there. So you sort of broke down 3 different areas, I think. So one is about the occupier and understanding their needs. One is about the building, and one is about the security.
Yeah.
So obviously, people's needs are becoming more and more important to how we manage buildings. So it's not just about the building. Can you say something about how you think technology is being used, how you use it yourself, or how it's going to be used to understand those needs better?
Yeah. So, I mean, I should maybe give you some examples how we're using technology at the moment. Think about your workplace and what you need in your proximity. You need to be able to have access to different facilities to find them. So digital wayfinding, I think, is a big area. Be able to book your meeting room when you need one, or to find actually out, are the meeting rooms available around me? I think this is kind of where we're going. I think let's say in the back of this, what I mentioned before, like the system which are like providing fresh air, providing power, the heating, I guess there will be a big change. I mean, at the moment, we're dealing with a lot of different manufacturers. And do we have like a standardized platform? Not really. Do we have like security standards when it comes to BMS systems? Not really. And I think this is a big area where I'm hoping there will be some more developments, and also that this is embraced by the wider industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing a bit of work at the moment on standards, so I'd love to come back and pick up on that in a minute. Cesar, hello. I think we're still struggling to hear you. So I'll pick up on the security issue with Thomas, maybe, if I can quickly. So from my perspective, buildings have always been relatively dumb concrete blocks. But as they're collecting more and more data, there's a much bigger cybersecurity type of risk to those. How do you think the sector's dealing with those, and how do you think we should be dealing with it going forward from an occupier point of view?
I think we need to deal with this very serious. I think maybe as a remark at the start, issue I see here is that we as occupier entering a building which is developed by someone else. So we as Google are not a real estate developer. So we need to use the system which are in place, which we don't have any influence or could, design or define how the security should be set up. So in my view, there needs to be done more from a developer side point of view, and also understand occupiers' needs better. I think can't recall when it was, but a couple of years ago, I know a building where Google was occupying some floors was hacked, and they hacked into the building management system and were able to modify like the heating and ventilation and cooling system. So if you imagine like cooling is provided for server rooms, which are critical infrastructure, and this could be like a real threat for businesses, not just for Google, I guess for almost every business.
Yeah, and my suspicion is Google's quite up to speed on technology generally. So if it can happen to them, it could happen to others. Cesar, I think we might have you now. The irony of a technology conference is that the technology always struggles, but great that you can join us.
Oh, hope so. If you can hear me now, okay?
I can indeed. Perhaps you can just say a few words about you and your role, and also your view on how technology has changed occupier needs in the last few years.
Sure. So what do I do? Verizon, I'm just going to try to do this real quick. So my role at Verizon is really try to look at, from a technology perspective in real estate, so I'm within the real estate organization. And it's to look at what emerging technologies that are out there and try to connect them with real business needs so that we can start solving problems. So it's creating technology with a purpose that can then be deployed at scale within Verizon. As a global corporate, we have a significant chunk of real estate around the world, around 100 million square feet, 6,000 offices, 135,000 people. So that's a vast portfolio. So the real challenge for us is how do we deploy technologies that are reliable at scale and in a simple way. So that's keeps us fairly busy. Going back to the second point of the question, what has technology done to the real estate environment in the last couple of years? Because this is pretty recent, as Thomas was saying earlier. Real estate has been a traditional industry that has not moved onto the technology bandwagon fairly on, for multiple different reasons. Some of them good, some of them bad, some of them I still believe in. But now, more recently, I would say in the past 2 to 3 years, we have seen a big change in the number of startups and companies that are coming out to the market with different PropTech, WorkTech, or ComTech, whichever name you want to give them, with different offerings out there they all solve problems, some better than others, but they all have a real purpose in the overall ecosystem. So we are looking at that actively, and we're looking at how things are evolving for us and how we're making it better, not just for the business, but also for the occupiers, the people that are living in the space.
Okay, that's great. So maybe I could stick with you and just ask a question that similar to one to Thomas there, is about, as people become more important to the buildings that we're running, and as the buildings themselves are collecting more data, how do we go about using data and technology to better understand what the people themselves want in that building and to measure the performance of them?
The holy grail question, without going into the privacy issues.
That's my next question.
Yeah. So there's multiple ways you can tackle this. From one end, not all the buildings gather data. Some buildings do, some buildings don't. The idea is how we put all this in a platform that can actually work. The way we structure, we look at data in 3, sometimes maybe 4 ways. First of all, is how do you collect data? Because the old approach, and this is something that has not worked very well in many cases, is just load everything with sensors and start gathering data, but then you have so much that you don't really know what to do with it. We have a little bit of a different approach. It's more about targeted data harvesting. So where do we really want to gather data, for what purpose? From that point is, how do we visualize that data, which can be then used by our operations team. The third stage is, how do we analyze the data from a data lake perspective that can be used by their planning teams, by the operations guys, by whoever may need the data, not in an immediate stage, but maybe something that is required 2, 3 days or even months or years after that. And the final one, which is the area where the holy grail, and we will probably know this better than anybody, is how do you use the predictive analytics, ML, and AI into all of that data? How do you start cross-referencing? So we look at data in those 4 big buckets. The key thing is, how do you collect that data without going into the privacy or GDPR issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And Thomas, anything to add on that, or is that the same?
Yeah, I think Cesar made some really good points. I mean, how are we going to deal with all the privacy GDPR issues we're probably going to face? I think there's a real value in collecting data, but you really need to be very sensible. And I'm working in different countries across Europe. And if you look at Google as a company with a global portfolio, each region has this different regulation. I think, give you one example. I think what I'm facing, my biggest challenge often is around the offer of meeting rooms. To give an example, the most complaints I receive is we don't have enough meeting rooms. I can't book a meeting room, I can't find a meeting room. So how are we going to solve this problem? I think it's probably an ongoing process, because we all teams have different needs. You know, a software engineer maybe have a different meeting routine than like a marketing guy. So I guess, yes, big data is probably a part of this answer. Collect data. How often is a meeting room booked? What is the booking rate? How many people are using this room? You know, if I have a large meeting room, which is just like used by 1 or 2 persons, I maybe should change them into like smaller meeting rooms to provide more space. Also, what is the distribution time? Is it like, are they peak hours? And yeah, I think in the end, you need to make some sense out of this data to inform like future designs of the office space.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of quick questions off the back of that then. The first one is the relationship between landlords and owners of property and the occupiers of the tenants. Now, obviously, sometimes you may own and occupy your own building, but how do you go about that relationship, and how does it work generally, do you think, between the landlord and the occupier sharing data? Cesar, is that a problem from your point of view, or something you come across?
Well, that question would have probably not been that relevant 4 or 5 months ago. Now it's a lot more relevant as most companies starting to plan return to office, game plans, and what does it mean from a landlord perspective? What does it mean from an occupier perspective? Would I want the landlord to have access to the employee data per se? It's down to the employee, really. It's down to the people that they own that data. It's their data. We can't force it on them. Yeah, the answer is probably no. We want the landlord to know the data about the building, how well the building is performing, how smart is it, making sure that they are taking everything they can into action. Could we get additional information that is specific to us? Depends on the type of building. If it's just one building that is wholly controlled by one company, then you can get it. That would be relevant. If it's a multi-tenanted building that you have many different companies coming in and you cannot get a little bit more granular on the data, then it's irrelevant. You cannot use that data for any purposes. At that point, having your own data collection methods are more relevant for the use cases that you may have in mind, or the problems you're trying to solve, whatever that may be, whether it's meeting rooms, whether it's desks, whether it's even bathrooms and leisure facilities. It really depends. But it's more about defining what kind of strategy you're going to be deploying depending on the kind of building you have. So it's not that. And not all landlords are interested in smart buildings. Some of them don't really care. Some of them have very old BMS systems, and they will leave them like that for as long as they can, as long as they can sweat the asset, and that's fine. That's their game plan. But it's more on what the tenants can do to influence the mindset change.
Yeah, absolutely. And Thomas?
Yeah, I think you made some good points here, Cesar. So in my experience with landlords, it's important to early engage with them, to let them know what we try to do and that they understand what kind of data we need, what we want to collect. And as you said, sometimes the systems are old or don't work. And I think developers have different goals than occupiers. They just want to provide a building which is profitable rather than maybe providing a great building experience. Sometimes their selling point is, we have a smart building by handing you over a lift card, which tells the lift where you need to go. So I think the first step, really engage with the landlord, let them know what you need, but then also adjust your goals and what you could get out of this, what kind of data we can collect. And it's probably easier if you the sole tenant or if you own the building, than if you just renting 1 or 2 floors in a large building. And then you maybe can do, just a little bit of catching or collecting data rather than if you own the building.
Yeah. Okay. So I think to summarize then, the answer is sharing data is an ongoing discussion and challenge where there are benefits, but there are risks of it as well. So I wanted to look at the sharing of data, but from a different perspective, rather than in one building. You're both working teams that are global organizations. And obviously real estate tends to be quite a local business. So you're taking a very global view of local businesses. And sharing data from a standards point of view can get very difficult, frankly, within a country, but certainly as it goes internationally. I just wondered if you had any views on either the challenges that we've got around standards or what real estate needs to do to make it easier for organizations such as yourself to understand the global portfolio and how buildings are performing. Cesar, maybe I could come to you on that.
I tend to run away from standards because for me, standard means a closed ecosystem, and I don't really like closed ecosystems. I like to think more of them as guidelines on which parameters can be used. From a communication protocol, we tend to go most of the things we do as open as they can be, because it allows integration and interoperability between different systems. If you're going to be starting to populate a data lake and you want to make sense of that data lake and do very deep analytics on it and deep learning, and then, as I said, the latter of the 4 phases I just described, you need to have a methodology to bring all of that data in to be able to be processed. If you're doing that in a closed ecosystem, you're going to end up with multiple different silos that they need to be mined. It's going to be very time consuming. So we tend to go more for the open source type standard, or something that is very integrable with, so call it an open API or API plugins that you can have harvest the data as open as it can be. And then, of course, building the platforms that are on top of that to give us that visibility. whatever the platform may be, if it's a building intelligence system or whether it be something that is going to be used by the occupants of the building or something that will be used by our planning team later on. So it's just building platforms over open systems that allow us to harvest that information.
Okay, great. And Thomas, your view on the sort of globalization standards, there are clearly benefits of standards and downsides as well. So,
yeah, I think open source is probably a good example. And within Google, we have like a dedicated system that's looking after, like, let's call it operating system of the buildings. And they came up with a good example. They said you should view your building as a smartphone. You know, you have your platform, which is iOS or Android. And then you have like different developers who are providing apps, and all these apps could run on the system. And I think this is probably, in very simple terms, something that we need to get to in order to successfully like share, collect data, and also operating smart buildings.
yeah, I think that's very true. I came across an example recently of a residential property where you needed to download something like 15 different apps on your phone. So I think there's a real challenge about how we manage that going forward. So
True. But then I always have this debate between multi-app, because they all have their pros and cons. And sometimes having a bit of you can pick the app you want to use depending on what you want to really use it for, and then disregard all the other 20 apps that may be available, versus having one single package that can offer you anything, but you're using 10% of it. So again, that goes back to deciding which strategy you want to pursue when deploying all these technologies at scale, as to whether you want something with a single app or a single platform. I would probably go with a single platform.
yeah, no, entirely fair point. So we're going to have a lot of different people listening to this, from advisors and consultants through to the tech companies. I just wanted to dig into, what are your biggest challenges that you've got at the moment from a technology point of view that people can help you with? So what are the challenges that you have with understanding the amount of technology companies that are out there, or how to apply it, or how to use it on a global basis? Thomas, maybe if I could start with you, what are some of the challenges you're seeing?
I think probably from my point of view, I think it's just the amount which is out there, and where can I find the benefit, and then working not just like in one country, but I think at the moment I have projects across 9 countries. Every country, I would say, is like on a different level of development, how they use technology, and in some countries you even struggle to get people to work with BIM, which in my view is a basic. So I think it's probably what is like the right technology which helps me as an occupier to create some benefits. Should it be like for the users, or maybe for the efficiency of the building, and then also implement this. And construction projects are often run 1, 2, or 3 years, and maybe by the time to implement something, it's already outdated. So this is the challenge I'm facing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And Cesar?
I would summarize it as make it simple and scalable, particularly for companies that have very large portfolio. Think about Google or many of the other corporates, Verizon included. We have with thousands of buildings across the world, with thousands of BMS systems, and a lot of those have been by acquisition. We have acquired a lot of companies, we have disposed a lot of companies. Are we really going to change all of those BMS systems into one platform? Probably not. It's going to cost a lot of money to do that. So how can we use IoT to help us supplement those BMS? And on top of that is making sure that those solutions are very easy to deploy, that pretty much anybody can do it. They're not complex. Complexity and is one of our biggest enemies, and I learned this from a good colleague of mine very early on. In this world, if you have something complex, it's never going to scale, and you have to be able to repeatedly do it over and over again across the world. So if that for me is by far the biggest challenge. The second is going to be cybersecurity. That's one of the reasons why, and I heard Thomas talking about it earlier. That's one of the big things. That's one of the things that does keep me up at night. How to bridge the gap between the full automation, so machine to machine automation, and then machine to human automation. So I think there's going to be a step way to get us to the MTM, but we're not quite ready yet for that. That's one of the reasons why a lot of landlords have actually decided to keep their buildings completely disconnected, because of that potential risk. But there's a lot more to come, and we will see showing up in the very near future. I mean, we have been accelerated significantly by the pandemic, and a lot of the things that we were thinking about deploying 1, maybe 2 years from now, they've been brought fast forward.
Okay, great. So we've just got a couple of minutes left, and we've just got a question that's come in about COVID-19. So I just wanted to ask about how you think technology, what your approach is to getting people back into the office. Thomas, I know you can't say too much about the Google approach specifically, but it'd be good just to get your thoughts for a minute or so on how technology can generally help people get back to the office as we go back to the work environment. So Cesar, maybe I can stay with you and pick that up with you first, and then come to you, Thomas.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I think different companies have different ways of doing it. I cannot disclose the specifics of Verizon either, but we can talk about some of the things that we have seen, some of the things that we have considered. There's a lot of technology out there, so you've got even from people counting technology that is going to help us measure density and making sure that we are within the limits of the building and we're not bursting into seams. So you've got other very simple technology developments that would help you allow to measure how good your cleaning teams are performing, when it was the last time they cleaned something. A lot of the things here is going to be transparency to the people. People want to make sure that they're safe in the building. As a company, you want them to feel, you want to somehow digitally remove some of that anxiety digitally. And that's what we're trying to do. So that is the concept. And with that in mind, there's a lot of different solutions that you can bring in to help us do that. I'm not saying that the technology is going to solve everything. There's a lot of human factors, a lot of physical stuff in the facilities management world that is being implemented, sanitizing stations or separating the desk at a certain distance, putting blanking plates in between. So there's a whole host of solutions out there that are not digital, they're analog. But then there's a way in which digital can help just to communicate or to actually help us make our operations team better and operate more effectively as we go into the RTO, return to office game plan.
Fantastic. And Thomas, some thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I think probably most what Cesar said is true. And yeah, unfortunately I can't share any details, but like from a personal view, if you think about booking your desk in advance, booking your meeting rooms, like that people feel they are in control, and it's probably more about the people themselves, that they feel secure, because everyone has different needs, and some people are more anxious about the whole situation than others, and you want to assure them, and you maybe have an application which tells you the table you booked was deep cleaned before you enter the office space and use this table, and all these other bits, and maybe shows you around what is the right route, that you don't bump into someone else, like could I wash my hands, all this kind of stuff. I think this could be something which companies are using going forward.
Okay, fantastic. So I have one eye on the clock, and I think we're out of time. So I'm just going to wrap up and clearly say thank you very much to both Thomas and Cesar for joining us. Some really good insights there, and there's obviously an awful lot of opportunity and benefits that technology and data can bring, but also some real risks that both corporate occupiers and landlords and advisors and providers need to bear in mind. So certainly exciting times moving forward. So I will sign off there and say thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for the questions, and hope to see some of the people soon.